Welcome to the Youth Employment Network's webinar on evaluation in youth employment, the first in a series of 3 webinars on monitoring and evaluation. Our presenters today are Drew, Sylvia, and Susanna, who will talk about the Youth Employment Network's approach to evaluation and the services they offer to organizations to help them improve their M&E systems.
We did an analysis of a meta-analysis of many different projects, youth employment projects, which we're doing work with youth, and we found that only 15% of youth employment programs, that's programs based in developing countries, provide evidence of impact. So we want to increase this number. We think it's there's a significant amount of work to do there. There's 15% of youth employment programs which are evaluating and producing information about the impact of their projects. Go one step further, that number even reduces even more when you look at disseminating that information and really teaching people about what works and what doesn't work when it comes to programs and policies in youth employment. So we want to work on the spreading of this knowledge as well, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. The second slide is how do we achieve these 3, how do we answer these 3 whys about working on youth employment. For us, that's why we did the circle here. The most important is the capacity building part. So if practitioners and policymakers don't know how to evaluate their project, then we're not going to go to the next stages of doing it and disseminating it. So we started this fund really as a way of building the capacity of practitioners and policymakers. We do that in a couple of different, how we do that is in a couple of different ways, and that's the next slide. The second reason, the second way which we achieve the objectives is through rigorous evaluation on impact. So that's really the teaching about the different methodologies which are used to evaluate impact. And those are really all across the board. We won't go too much into those today. But we advocate from all the way from very rigorous methods of evaluating your impact, such as randomized control trials and control groups and randomized selection, all the way to just working on the basic methods of how do you do a logical framework or results chain. How do you set up smart indicators for your project? How do you set up instruments in order to collect the data on those indicators, and everything kind of across the board. So we really look at methods, M&E methods, which are appropriate to the capacity, the experience, and the knowledge of the organizations that we're working with, and we try to adapt the methodologies based on that. And the third way is to go out and actually do the dissemination of the evidence. So we've set up a couple of online portals which will do that, and we're trying to work closely with governments, with academics, with specialists, in order that some of this work and some of the knowledge that we're gaining through this work is really disseminated on a wide basis, and that it's really learned by the people that need it. Yen has been now for almost 5 years doing evaluation clinics. These are 3 to 4 day workshops in country, involving kind of up to 60 participants, teaching policymakers and practitioners how to do impact evaluation and how to set up an M&E system. Over 300 participants have been involved in this since 2008. We have clinics which will be coming up this year in East and West Africa, and we'll be able to provide you further details on that, maybe not in this session, but definitely coming up within the next couple of months for those of you that would be based in these regions. The The approach we use for the clinics is very hands-on, so what we like to do is work through case studies, which are used as kind of a unit of analysis during the clinics. So these case studies are normally competitively selected, so we'll look at the approach, the methodology, the participants, which projects are using to evaluate their programs. And then we use that as a unit of analysis for participants to kind of go through the step-by-step process of setting up an impact evaluation or monitoring and evaluation system. We work with a number of consultants, experts, and specialists to deliver these clinics, coming from organized large institutions such as the World Bank to very regionalized or specialized institutions such as the Dubai School of Government. We work very closely with a foundation in Qatar for our work in Middle East called Silatech as well. Depending on where we're delivering the clinic, we'll work with different specialists, normally from that region, but also internationally. What we also try to do is provide some continuity to the evaluations, the projects we do work with in those clinics. We assign the specialists and experts to accompany, to mentor those projects following up from their participation in the clinic. And we also try to provide them, if possible, or with financial support to support the implementation of their evaluation, if it makes sense for us and if it makes sense for the organization that we're working with. The second point is on technical assistance on M&E. I wanted to use the example of our work in the Middle East here because that's the project or the program that I'm most involved in. That work is called the Takeem Fund for Youth Employment. We're working with 11 organizations in 7 countries in the Middle East in North Africa. And the idea is to design, develop, and implement an improved monitoring and evaluation or impact evaluation project. In difference from our work in the past, we've opened up the box of our work on evaluation. We're not only focusing on impact evaluations and doing really experimental evaluations, but we're also working with organizations to improve their databases, systems, approaches to monitoring and evaluation. And those approaches include both qualitative and quantitative instruments, what we call in the business mixed method evaluations. And we also try to focus strongly on how ICT can improve these monitoring and evaluation instruments. So we're looking at setting up technology-powered databases, monitoring and evaluation databases for these organizations, which would allow them to take kind of the data which they're collecting on their beneficiaries from paper to computer to internet, and we hope that a lot of these organizations will be operating kind of cloud-based monitoring and evaluation databases in the future for those that have good internet connections at least. We also are kind of testing or experimenting with both web-based surveying and also mobile phone-based surveying. So we're working with a couple of private service providers that provide this type of services. So I'm sure a lot of you know about services such as SurveyMonkey, Survey Gizmo, and there's hundreds of web-based surveying tools out there right now. We're trying to look at which ones fit best for the organizations that we're working with, and that organizations have the internet connections which would allow them to do some more rigorous web-based surveying. For organizations which have less internet connections, mobile phone is sometimes a solution to do this type of work because even very, very remote regions these days have access to phone lines. So we've been working with private service providers such as the Nokia data gathering tool. Rapid SMS is another one that we've been working with, and looking at how organizations with limited internet connection can still move from collecting, storing the information on paper to getting it onto some type of electronic platform. So it's very experimental, I would say, to start out, but I think this is the wave of the future when it comes to M&E, so we'd like to be involved and see the learnings that are out there. The third area is on cash awards. This is something that this year, which we've limited to a certain extent, but we understand and we've experienced that impact evaluations are a very expensive way of evaluating projects, and we've tried to provide some support, which would be usually only a portion of the impact evaluation, either funding a baseline survey, a follow-up survey, an end-line survey, so that we can help with the costs, which can get up to hundreds of thousands of dollars when we talk about impact evaluation. But also providing some in-kind support as far as assigning expert consultants to the organizations to help them build up their M&E systems, providing them in-kind data collection instruments, and training on monitoring and evaluation. So these cash awards also include kind of in-kind cash support where we can be involved in the process and add our expertise as far as the area goes. So that's something that's been reduced in our work currently, but something which is still available if it makes sense for the organizations. These are impact evaluations, so we're talking about social experiments that we're either running or helping to run, and all of these would be in Africa or Northern or Sub-Saharan Africa or Northern Africa. I'm going to talk about two of these, and then Susanna and Sylvia, feel free afterwards to jump in and talk about any of the other ones. The one on the right-hand side of the screen, called Empowerment and Livelihood for Adolescents, is an impact evaluation which is actually in the latter stages of the research at this moment, and we're really hoping that in the next few weeks we'll be able to share with you the final reports of this impact evaluation. This is a project which is run by a large international NGO called BRAC. BRAC has a research and evaluation unit that is responsible for doing this impact evaluation. So the interesting part is that you don't have an external research firm coming in and doing this evaluation, but it's actually the research unit within the NGO which is doing all the work on this. This is a randomized control trial, and I'll get a little bit into the specifics of that here because it's kind of a cutting-edge design. The evaluation is looking at 150 villages in Tanzania. 100 of these 150 villages are receiving what's called the Empowerment and Livelihoods for Adolescents Projects, ELA. ELA is a adolescent girls project, an empowerment project. It's being run in actually 3 countries. In addition to Tanzania, it's also being run in Uganda and South Sudan. And there's also an impact evaluation which is going on in Uganda for this project. The interesting part of this evaluation is that it's something that we call a multi-treatment design. So of the 150 villages which are participating in the evaluation, 50 of the villages won't receive the ELA intervention at all. So that's what we call in the jargon a control group. So they'll be surveyed, but they won't receive any of the intervention.